Welcome students, parents, and guardians. This is the start of the BFG book that fifth grade picked to do online learning with everyone. Each day you'll have 5 separate parts of work that covers 2 chapters per day. These are as follows. You'll do a quick write at the beginning with a prompt that will be given to you. You'll have vocabulary, 3 words per every 2 chapters. You will also have a true and false sequencing or multiple choice to do after the reading of the chapters takes place, comprehension and analysis, and some activities that take you beyond. You will need the following materials: your pencil, your BFG ELA packet, computer or a smartphone or tablet, and you'll also need a Mindset thinking cap. I'm going to be talking to you about a quick write, and then we'll be going over chapters 1 and 2 today. The quick write is just what it says, a quick write. You'll find the work for today's chapters on pages 1 and 2 in your ELA packet. Today's quick write for chapters 1 and 2 will be on the following prompt. Have you ever been awake in the middle of the night when everyone else is asleep? What did you do? What was it like? Right now, you can pause, push the pause button to do your quick write. Take a couple of minutes. It's okay if you don't get to it. This is pre-recorded, so you can pause as long as you want, or you can go back and finish it up later. Next, we're gonna look at the vocabulary words for chapters 1 and 2 today. Find the page in your booklet that is a list of vocabulary words based on the chapters. Today's vocabulary words are hesitate, which means to pause. Second word is longed, which means to desire. You longed for ice cream. You desired it. The third word is peering, which means peeking or looking out. Have you ever peered at something? So take the time now to write down the definitions to the 3 vocabulary words. Hesitated, which means paused. Longed, which means desired something. Or peering, which means peeking or looking at. Next, we're going to start with the reading of the chapters. Find your booklet for the BFG. And from there, you're going to go to chapter 1, which is called The Witching Hour. I'm going to read these for you, chapters 1 and 2, after which you will continue on in your ELA booklet for the BFG, the comprehension booklet, and answer the rest of the questions and do the information for chapters 1 and 2. So here we go. The Witching Hour. Sophie couldn't sleep. A brilliant moonbeam was slanting through a gap in the curtains. It was shining right onto her pillow. The other children in the dormitory had been asleep for hours. Sophie closed her eyes and lay quite still. She tried very hard to doze off. It was no good. The moonbeam was like a silver blade slicing through the room onto her face. The house was absolutely silent. No voices came up from downstairs. There were no footsteps on the door above either. The window behind the curtain was wide open, but nobody was walking on the pavement outside. No cars went by on the street. Not the tiniest sound could be heard anywhere. Sophie had never known such a silence. I'm hoping you have the pictures that are drawn in the book. There's Sophie laying in her bed in the dormitory. Perhaps she told herself that was what they called the witching hour. The witching hour. Somebody had once whispered to her was a special moment in the middle of the night when every child and every grown-up was in deep, deep sleep. and all the things came out from hiding and had the world to themselves. The moonbeam was brighter than ever on Sophie's pillow. She decided to get out of her bed and close the gap in the curtains. You got punished if you were caught out of bed after lights out, even if you said you had to go to the laboratory. That was not accepted as an accepted excuse, and they punished you just the same. But there was no one about now. Sophie was sure of that. She reached out for her glasses that lay on the chair beside her bed. They had steel rims and very thick lenses, and she could hardly see a thing without them. She put them on, then she slipped out of her bed and tiptoed over to the window. When she reached the curtains, Sophie hesitated. She longed to duck underneath them and lean out of the window to see what the world looked like now that the witching hour was at hand. She listened again. Everywhere it was deathly still. The longing to look out became so strong she couldn't resist it. Quickly, she ducked her head under the curtains and leaned out the window. In the silvery moonlight, the village street she knew so well seemed completely different. The houses looked bent and crooked, like houses in a fairy tale. Everything was pale and ghostly and milky white. Across the road, she could see Mrs. Rance's shop, where you bought buttons and wool and bits of elastic. It didn't look real. There was something dim and misty about that too. Sophie allowed her eye to travel further and further down the street. Suddenly, she froze. There was something coming up the street on the opposite side. It was something black, something tall and black, something very tall and very black and very thin. So that's the end of chapter 1, and I'm going to go on and read you chapter 2. The name of this chapter is called Who? It wasn't human. It couldn't be. It was 4 times as tall as the tallest human. It was so tall its head was higher than the upstairs windows of the houses. Sophie opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Her throat, like her whole body, was frozen with fright. This was the witching hour, all right. The tall, black figure was coming her way. It was keeping very close to the houses across the street, hiding in the shadowy places where there was no moonlight. On and on it came, nearer and nearer. But it was moving in spurts. It would stop, then it would move on. Then it would stop again. But what on earth was it doing? Aha! Sophie could now see what it was up to. It was stopping in front of each house. It would stop and peer into the upstairs windows of each house in the street. It actually had to bend down to peer into the upstairs windows. That's how tall it was. It would stop and peer in, then it would slide onto the next house and stop again and peer in, and so on all along the street. It was much closer now, and Sophie could see it more clearly. Looking at it carefully, she decided it had to be some kind of person. Obviously, it was not a human, but was definitely a person. A giant person, perhaps. Sophie stared hard across the misty moonlit street. The giant, if that was what it was wearing a long black cloak. In one hand, he was holding what looked like a very long, thin trumpet. In the other hand, he held a large suitcase. The giant had stopped now, right in front of Mr. and Mrs. Gucci's house. The Gucci's had a green grocer's shop in the middle of the high street, and the family lived up above the shop. The 2 Gucci children slept in the upstairs front room. Sophie knew that. The giant was peering through the window into the room where Michael and Jane Gucci were sleeping. From across the street, Sophie watched and held her breath. She saw the giant step back and a pace and put the suitcase down on the pavement. He bent over and opened the suitcase. He took something out of it. It looked like a glass jar, one of those square ones with a screw top. He unscrewed the top of the jar and poured what was in it into the end of the long trumpet thing. Sophie watched, trembling. She saw the giant straighten up again, and she saw him poke the trumpet in through the open upstairs window of the room where the Gucci children were sleeping. She saw the giant take a deep breath, and woof, he blew through the trumpet. Here he is, bending into the window and woofing something into the window of the Gucci children's room. No noise came out, but it was obvious to Sophie that whatever had been in the jar and now been blown through the trumpet into the Gucci children's bedroom. What could it be? As the giant withdrew the trumpet from the window and bent down to pick up the suitcase, he happened to turn his head and glance across the street. In the moonlight, Sophie caught a glimpse of an enormous, long, pale, wrinkly face with the most enormous ears. The nose was as sharp as a knife, and above the nose there were two bright, flashing eyes, and the eyes were staring straight at Sophie. There was a fierce and devilish look about them. Sophie gave a yelp and pulled back from the window. She flew across the dormitory and jumped into her bed and hid under the blanket. And there she crouched, still as a mouse and tingling all over. So that's the end of chapter 2 for today. I want you to go to your packets of comprehension for the BFG story and finish all the parts of chapters 1 and 2. Someone will be with you tomorrow to continue with the chapters. You take good care, and we'll see you soon. Aloha and malama pono.